Welcome to Prep Station Literature in English. Today we'll be looking at tips and tricks to succeeding in UTME Literature in English. First off, we'll begin with the recommended texts for UTME Literature in English, but you must note that Prep Station will go through a series of past question papers in UTME Literature in English. So to begin with, we'll look at books such as Second Class Citizen by Buchi Emecheta, Unexpected Joy at Dawn by Alex Agiri. Then we'll look at Wuthering Heights, although Invisible Man is included, but we'll look at Wuthering Heights, questions from Wuthering Heights rather. Then questions from The Lion and the Jewel, and then questions from Look Back in Anger by John Osborne. We would also look at some poems. These are some of the poems JAM would pick as questions from: Black Woman by Leopold Sedar Senghor, The Leader and the Led by Niyo Shudari, The Grieved Lands of Africa by Agostino Neto, The Song of the Women of My Land by Omar Farouk Sese, Raider of the Treasure Trove by Lade Wonsuru, then A Government Driver on His Retirement by Onu Chibike. For non-African poems, we'll look at questions from The Good Morrow by John Donne, Caged Bird by Maya Angelou, The Journey of the Magi by T.S. Eliot, Do Not Go Gentle into That Good Night by Dylan Thomas, and Bisney Poplars by G.M. Hopkins, Bat by David H. Lawrence. So let's begin and let's note some things. The questions for UTME Literature are divided into three segments. First, we have the general literary principles, then we have literary appreciation, and then we look at questions from the literature texts and poems. For general literature principles, you have the seen and unseen poetry, and then for literary appreciation, you have questions from literary principles, your figures of speech, and some other things that have to do with literature, then your literature texts. So we'll begin with the general literary principles. The first question: a poetic device in which an idea in a line runs into another is called A, rhyme scheme, B, enjambment, C, end rhyme, and C, pathos. Our answer is enjambment. Enjambment is also known as the run-on lines, where you have lines from poems running into one another without the use of punctuation marks. A typical example of where this element is explored is Ibadan, the poem Ibadan by J.P. Clark. Question 2. The use of sound patterns to suggest meaning in poetry is A, rhyme, B, mime, C, lyric, D, metonymy. So let's look at these options. Obviously, it cannot be mime because mime has to do with a play that, mime is a type of play that does not make use of words. The actors and the characters, they just act. And it's not lyric. Neither is it the metonymy. Metonymy is a figure of speech where a part represents a whole, which is kind of similar to synecdoche. So it's rhyme. Rhyme is the regular movement of sound in poetry. When the sounds or words suggest the noises, meaning, or objects that make these sounds, you say it's an onomatopoeia. But rhyme has to do with the regular movement of sounds in poetry. And a factor that examines the regular movement of sound is the meter, where you look at the stressed and unstressed syllable as well. Number 3, a conscious imitation of a literary work by another with the aim of ridicule is mimesis, B, performance, C, mockery, D, parody. The answer to this question is parody, because a parody is a work of art which intentionally copies the style of another literary work in a way that features of the original are ridiculously noticeable. So you would see an imitation of a work, and then the purpose is just to make fun or just to create some form of comedy out of it anyway. So it's just a where actors are being put to do ridiculous things. It's not necessarily as the original play is. So the answer is parody. Number 4, the pride that contributes to the fall of a tragic character in a play is known as A. Hamartia, B. Catharsis, C. Hubris, D. Epistasis. The answer to this question is hubris. In literature, when you have a tragedy, you notice that there's a tragic hero, and that tragic hero is driven by if that tragic hero has a flaw, okay, and that is what drives the tragic hero. So the flaw of the tragic hero is the hamartia, that is the weakness of that tragic hero, and the weakness could be ambition or fate. But in this case, the tragic hero is driven by the weakness, as we all know, and the pride that leads to the fall is the hubris. But at some point when we are watching a tragedy, we tend to have this pity on the tragic hero, and our emotions are purged. That is where the catharsis comes into play. So the answer to that question is the hubris. Question 5. A group of 3 lyric stanzas in classical Greek poetry is referred to as A. Triplet, B. Triolet, C. Trilogy, D. Triad. The answer to this question is a triad because it's a 3-stanza lyric poem in Greek poetry, not the regular poetry. It's actually the Greek poetry. Question 6. A play which mainly aims at provoking excessive laughter is called A. Tragic comedy, B. A comedy, C. A farce, D. A satire. In this case, we are looking at a type of comedy. So it's not just comedy. We know comedies are plays that, yes, could evoke laughter and at the same time has a happy ending. But in this case, it's a farce because nothing serious is discussed and then everyone just watches a farce just to get entertained and people laugh, basically. So nothing serious, and sometimes you might say a farce is such that no character actually dies. Nothing serious. They are just like your slapsticks, rather. So in this case, it's a farce. It's not your regular comedy because comedy has all that genres like the farce as well. So it's a farce. Number 7. Travelog is a work of art written A. by a famous playwright, B. before the death of the author, C. by an unpopular novelist, D. on a journey. The answer is on a journey. Already there's a clue to that question because when you look at travelogue, what is a travelogue? It's more or less like a documentation of the adventures a character goes through, okay? A documented report or a written report of a character's journey is a travelogue. So his adventures are put in place, are written. You could say to an extent that the novel Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift is an example of a travelogue because you have Gulliver's documentation or his trips to Lilliput and to the other places he traveled to. So these were like a documentation of his travels. So you could use Gulliver's Travel as an example of a travelogue. A ballad is meant to be A. acted, B. sung, C. discussed, and D. read. The first question is, a ballad is under what genre of literature? You could say that a ballad is a poem. It's a type of poem. So it's a type of oral poetry, and it's a narrative poem that tells a simple story, basically. So in this case, it's not, because it's a poem, it's not acted and it can't be discussed. Neither is it read. It might be read aloud, yes, but a ballad is a song. It's meant to be sung. It's oral, it's a form of oral poetry anyway. Number 9, a character who reenacts familiar experiences that readers easily identify with is dash. Here you have different types of character. A round character in a play is a character that grows as situation unfolds. A flat character is one that is easily predictable. And here you have a stock character and a static character. Static character is similar to a flat character in the sense that nothing changes. So a static character just remains, just like the flat character. But a stock character is one who reenacts familiar experiences that leaders easily identify with. Example, Adekoka in Purple Hibiscus is an example of a stock character. And you could say that Adekoka is like an imitation of Delegiwa. That is the reporter in the book Purple Hibiscus. So an example of a stock character is Adekoka in the book Purple Hibiscus by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Number 10. The plot of a story generally refers to dash A. Intrigue made by a character against the hero. B. Way the character ends the story. C. The way in which events in the story are organized. D. The way in which a writer begins a story. Plot in literature simply deals with the storyline. So it has to do with the way in which events in the story are organized from the beginning to the middle and to the end. That is like for a linear or a chronological plot. You have it that way. Sometimes it could be cyclical in the sense that it could start from the end of the story and then takes you through events in the story, and then you come back to that end that you met at the beginning. So when you talk about a plot in literature, you're talking about the way in which events in a story are organized, whether it's the linear or chronological or unchronological plot. Number 11. A literary work in which the characters and events are used as symbols is known as dash A. Characterization, B. Allegory, C. Metaphor, D. Parallelism. The answer to this question is an allegory. An allegory is a type of literary work where the characters are a representation of things. They are symbolic. A typical example is Animal Farm by George Orwell. It's an allegory because it represents, or it's a representation of a certain part of leadership, or a certain part, or a particular kind of government. So that is what an allegory does. You could read and then relate to that. Another example is Niyo Shudare's poem, The Leader and the Led. The characters are a representation of the types of leaders we have in Africa. Number 12. In literary work, verbal irony refers to A. The device in which the speaker means the opposite of what he says. B. A situation in which a character speaks or acts against the trend of events. C. Difficult situation which defies logic. And D. A device in which the speaker means what he says. The answer to this question is A. It's a device in which the speaker means the opposite of what he says. In literature, we have verbal irony, we have situational irony. And verbal irony, in this case, verbal has to do with conversation and words. So when he or she says something directly opposite of what he means, is a verbal irony. Situational irony is such that you have a situation that one now goes the opposite way. For example, The Government's Driver on Retirement by Chibuike Onu. That poem is what happened to the driver is an example of a situational irony. Number 13. A poet's use of regular rhythm is known as dash. A. Allegory. B. Asuna. C. Meter. D. Onomatopoeia. Remember, we talked about rhythm earlier. So it's the use of regular rhythm and it's the meter, because rhythm is the metrical movement or flow of sounds that occur with each line. So in this case, that is the movement itself. When a poet makes use of the rhythm regularly in a poem, it has to do with meter. Meter has to do with the stressed and unstressed syllable as well to create the movement or flow of sounds. 14. Tones and mood of a poem refer to dash: A, setting, B, space, C, location, D, atmosphere. When you talk about tone, you're talking about the use of words by a writer in a poem or in a novel. So that is the writer's tone. When you talk about mood, the use of the words by the writer and how it makes you, the reader, feel. A writer might write in such a way that when you pick up the book to read or the work, at the end of the day, you are not happy. You have a kind of emotion. So that has to do with the mood. And mood could be relative as well, or it could be general. You pick up a tragic work and at the end of the day, you feel so sorry for the character, or you are happy that the major character has ended in that, or that's the end of the major character. But the tone has to do with the words, the choice of words. So all of these contribute to the atmosphere in terms of how the reader feels or how the writer feels, okay, or how characters in the work behave. So all of these contribute to the atmosphere created by the writer. 15. A device in drama where a character speaks alone is dash: A, apostrophe, B, dialogue, C, soliloquy, D, aside. Yes, an apostrophe is a figure of speech where a writer addresses something as though that thing were present. And the thing being addressed could be a tree, it could be an elephant, it could be a wind, it could be anything, living or not living. Dialogue is a conversation between two people. And then an aside is when in a stage play, the character could move to another part of the stage and then talk, but other characters are there. Or at the same time, the character could move aside, as the name signifies, and then speak. Then soliloquy, in this case, the writer soliloquizes, speaks alone, and then airs out his own thoughts. That's a soliloquy. A flat character can be described as one who dash: A, dies abruptly, B, achieves greatness, C, is undeveloped, D, undergoes changes. Yes, I discussed this earlier. So a flat character is undeveloped. For instance, Okonkwo in the novel Things Fall Apart could be described as a flat character because he is easily predictable. And even when development came at some point, he refused to develop. So in this case, a flat character is one who doesn't adapt to changes easily or is not willing to adapt to changes. So it's undeveloped. 17. Dramatis persona in a play refers to A, cast list, B, protagonist and antagonist, C, is undeveloped, D, undergoes changes. So dramatis persona refers to the cast list. A dramatist is one who writes a play. But when you see dramatis persona, you're referring to the cast list, the names of the people and their roles. The analysis of a work of art is dash: A, style, B, resolution, C, rhetorics, D, criticism. The answer is criticism. You're not looking at the bad side alone. You're looking at both the good side and the bad side. In other words, you are appreciating the work where you give your opinion of the things the writer did that was right and that was good, or then after a while you then come to things the writer should look out for in your own opinion. So by so doing, you're doing a literary criticism of a work. 19. In the plot, exposition does the following except A, sets the tone, B, introduces the characters, C, concludes the story, D, establishes the setting. In the plot, the exposition does not conclude the story. Remember, the question is the following except. Yes, it sets the tone through the choice of words, introduces the character comes in one after the other, then establishes the setting. So in this case, the exposition concludes the story. Prep Station will be right back.